Okay. Hello, everyone. It is very late. It's 3 a.m. here, and so I can't speak too loud, so hopefully this voice level is accessible to you. Anyways, I wanted to speak about this idea of multiple identifications in the same spotlight of awareness. Sorry, same spotlight of attention. In earlier talks, usually way earlier, like in 2014, I remember I saw the metaphor of the attention of the human being when they wake up to be very similar to a spotlight on a stage. And so life has a quality of observance to it, it's as if we are not just a pawn piece of nature, we are a chess piece of nature, we are a chess piece that is aware it is a piece. And it's interesting that we are aware we are on the chessboard, we're aware we are a piece, but we are not aware of how the pieces are moving. And so really the curiosities of the human species have taken it to its analysis of movement, especially if we choose to say the stillness, the static has no meaning. So what I'm trying to get to is really this idea that your attention is a conscious space. Now, I remember seeing a video, a very incredible video actually, which was a satsang of this man named Papaji, who Papaji is Muji's guru and also Ramana Maharshi's disciple. Now, Papaji is this man in India, somebody from the West has gone to him and is like, hey Papaji, tell me what this enlightenment is about, And Papaji looks at the person, and he's very, very intelligent guy. He looks at the person and he says, hey, where did you come from? And the guy says, I don't remember exactly. I think the guy said France. The guy had come from some European country. Papaji says, where did you come from? The guy says, from France. Then Papaji says, so tell me this. When you traveled from where you were to here, did the experience of existence change? A question to that extent. And what Papaji was trying to say was that the human being travels in its life. Think about all the places you've been to, but it has all been received as a conscious moment of being. That means whatever you do to you is a moment of being. Do you see? So this is the idea of what is moving if we are observing the movement. And this has been really, I find, the aim of true metaphysics. That we could see the physics, but now we're wondering if there is a space between the lines keeping it. That the hand writing the sentence is as ambiguous as the space between the words. The hand that is writing the word is as ambiguous as the space between the words, for example. That means the mystery of absence, the void, and the mystery of infinity, they both stand on the top shelf of man's wonder. Now, if the human being treats their attention as a spotlight, Papaji was telling that guy, buddy, you're traveling in different parts of existence, but has the presence of your attention been different? Do you know? That means like the different actors have come on stage, different elemental formations, different manifest properties of the world have, let us say, moved in front of, past the spotlight of your attention, been subjects of your attention. Now, the person is not the stuff, similar to the person looking from behind the camera knows that the camera is not the subject that it's filming. That's what I mean pretty much. I pretty much mean that there is a disconnection with everything that we feel we're attached to, in the sense that the one feeling attached to is not an object. So it's this mysterious situation where the person's like, if the idea of me is not material, then how can I just be material? That if the idea, the vision, the potential behind my eyes, it is not a physical landscape. You see, we don't treat the imagination as reality. We have exiled the imagination from the kingdoms of reality. We have only embraced the imagination that has accorded to some degree with reality. What I mean by that is imagination that could breathe and live through language. And there is way more than language. Language is just the mask man wore on his face because he couldn't comprehend what he saw in the mirror. Papaji was saying that the human personality moves, alters, changes in many ways throughout the life, but your presence of how energy is being to itself, that is where the game is at. That is where the yogi, that is the presence of the world, when you realize the inseparability of your attention from the very energy that keeps the whole reality here. That at some point man can no longer separate himself from his world, and that's when the advanced communicators and the pilots will roam this earth. I have been fascinated by multidimensionality the moment I realized we could lie, the moment I realized that perception can be classified, a classification is like the shattering of the mirror, It's a strategy, it's just a tactical strategy, divide and conquer. So you can say knowledge has been an effort for man to conquer the unknown by dividing it and classifying it and naming it and all the other things we have done to the unknown. Yet there were some who understood that the unknown was unknown. That even though it had a codependency to knowledge, even though the idea of the unknown may not be interesting to someone who doesn't even care about knowledge, but the idea of the unknown was actually the glitch in the system. That the sensory perception cannot explain a movement that is prior to the senses. So this is why I'm a person who, when asked like what my general worldview is, I'm like, the world is not language, because I know language can possess a person, can steal a person's life from them, but it can also give them life. I've seen it in my own childhood, certain ways I could have lived, certain energetic ways I could have lived. It was just that language from my environment that had entered my ear had intimidated me out of my own ability. There is a story from Hafiz of Shirazi. Hafiz was a Sufi mystic poet who, in one of his poems, he goes to this other next level poet named Attar, a person who was much more wiser than him. But they were both great poets in Persian history. But let me tell you what it is. The idea is that Hafiz was the Sufi mystic, metaphysical landscape he entertained. And so he goes to Attar and he's like, Attar, I want to be your disciple. And Attar looks at him and says, you're not ready. And so Hafiz gets so offended. He's like, how dare he say, I have seen the other side. How dare he say I'm not ready? And Hafiz gets so influenced by what Attar says that he goes what Sufis and dervishes would do back in the day. He would go and he went to, like he says this, but in his poetry he says he goes to the desert or wasteland, like some wasteland or desert, for 40 days, and he draws a circle and he sits in that circle for 40 days. Now, of course, keep in mind they entertained a metaphysical landscape back in the day, you know. In Hafiz's poetry, after 40 days, I believe it was 40 days, after 40 days, an angel appears to Hafiz in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of that desert. And Hafiz, the point of him sitting in the circle was to sit there until all his desires have vanished. All his desires have evaporated in the light of his mindfulness, in the light of the attention that is before it can do, that is before it can't do. It is. That is the secret of this world. It's not a concept. It's just being. And so Attar, the angel, says, not Attar, Hafiz. The angel comes to Hafiz and says, Hafiz, what do you want? Heaven will give you anything. What do you want? That means even the divine came and asked him, Hafiz, what's your desire? That means it's one thing when a person in this realm gives you a gift. It's another thing where the divine, if you consider the divine will to the cosmos, the divine will gives you. So that was a moment where the divine will in Hafiz's inner realms in the desert, when he was alone in that circle, he had drawn on the sand. Hafiz doesn't respond. Complete silence. The angel leaves. Imagine an angel. Imagine the secret. Imagine this life is a simulation, and imagine someone from outside of the simulation comes and tells you, I'll give you anything you want beyond the simulation. And Hafiz stood silent. He passed the mystical test, but not based on his rationality, based on his inner reverence, based on what he revered as being superior to anything he can do. And so an angel leaves, and Hafiz gets up from the circle and he just walks to Attar. And Attar, as if his intuition is a GPS, just opens the door before Hafiz gets to the house and sees Hafiz and says, you're ready. Because now Hafiz had understood that if you want desires and you want to get a teaching, you'll become dependent on the personality that gives you the teaching, But if you don't have the desire, yet the authentic wonder, then the inner realms are at your service. But if you want to take from something that is not even an object, then you are the most blind of the blind. I'm speaking to an audience, to just human beings that potentially may wonder about theosophical implications of reality, So in that situation, it was as if in the spotlight of attention had realized it is not necessary. It can be in any moment based on its will, but it is not necessary per se to say the temporary to define, to be a definition. You see, we say it's an entropic universe in the sense that there is a heat death. The universe is going to it's going to become too much for itself, poetically speaking. Now this change, this alteration in the temperature of the cosmos changing, as we say from the Big Bang, things have been cooling down and crystallizing into complexity and form. But the idea is that attention doesn't have per se an object-oriented purpose, and subjects are inspired out of objects. That means you don't really need the idea of a soul if you are not a body, if you're not embodied. You don't need the idea of human, for example, when you're no longer human. That means in the future, let's say in 120 years, everybody becomes machines. They connect everybody's head. It's like cooler to be connected, to have your brain connected to the internet than to use the internet, imagine, you know? Do you know what's going to happen the moment man becomes machine? It would be extinction before extinction. The extinction of the secrets of nature in our veins. Because it's really, really overwhelming, guys. When you think about the destiny poetically, not even destiny, the outcome of a species of 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. Like, you don't know how many nights I have just tried to escape into the little me, only to see the little me is in a big place. Ooh, this world is bigger than I can imagine. And that is my point. The attention is unconditional. This is why they would say unconditional love, unconditional compassion, unconditional honor. That means the honor was not relevant, or the compassion or the joy or whatever. It was not relevant to the condition. Do you know what that means? That means nothing can touch you, or no condition can touch the unconditional. And so it's as if your presence is unconditional. Your personality can be nothing other than the conditions of life being the ink of the pen of your free will. And what are the conditions of life? The conditions of life are the circumstances of our evolution and what evolution has implied. How an object has become a subject to itself. So now the strategy is no longer to just have objective games. Do you know? And that's the point of education. Education is like more advanced sports, but it's sports that no longer needed to be physical anymore. You know? That means here's the thing. When I was young, I didn't like reading that much, and I would just play soccer all the time. Like, I could tell you, like, I have a certain good control with the soccer ball. Mainly because, like, it was something that I admired. And because I admired, I gave myself permission to be a fool in that world, to learn anew from it. So in my youth, I was excited about getting the ball and scoring. I was like, yeah, that's what it's all about. But then later on, I realized, wait a minute, where am I running though? So the thing was, I mean, of course, I had a sort of, like, I didn't have the stamina to become a footballer. But I noticed that now it's not a soccer ball to kick. It is the value of what life means in a space-time continuum as the days go by. That is the thing. That means I'm like, okay, if right now, like if we were back in the day, let's say Viking times, like, no, intellect and conversation and dialogue wouldn't be the best thing there. Like brute power, or like strength and will would be a better display. But now it's as if the arena has changed. You know, it's no longer just material considerations, as if we have been an object for so long where we're like, okay, what else is there? Like, seriously. Now, I don't know how to say it, like Friedrich Nietzsche, this German philosopher, I believe it was him. There was a debate on truth and the value, sorry, not the value of truth, the value of an illusion. That Friedrich Nietzsche spoke about how necessary is it to have the illusion remain, you know? So guys, so you think I have no idea how to respond to you in the chat section. I don't even know what your comment means. But anyways, I'm just suggesting that our attention, it's like a coin where one side of it doesn't have linguistic value. It has experiential value. And one side of it, of course, it's your inner realms, your how you can subjectify reality, how you can look at any object and it can coexist as a subtler symbol, you know. So you think if you want to share something about, I think I understand your comment. If you want to share something that relates to what I'm saying from that, then feel free to do so. The breath is here now. The breath is here now. The breath is here. We are conscious in moments, for the world turns in a moment. The attention is, if there was like, let's say an extraterrestrial invasion, well, I'm just hypothetically thinking in a sci-fi context. Let's say there was an extraterrestrial invasion and we noticed the extraterrestrials had way more advanced technology than us. And then we were, as human beings, trying to figure out how could we advance our own technologies. The answer would be to comprehend the nature of the attention. I think if you wanted to think of a human being that would need to defend itself, you return to your instincts. That means it's like when the ancient Greeks said to tame the savageness of man and make the life of the world, and make gentle the life of the world. You can totally see that means you're in the back in the day, the genetical phenomena express itself through savageness. Oh, okay, okay. So You think in the chat section says a Czech glycan group. I just realized what that is. So you're talking about like how the basic protein of protein cells of a mammal are in some sense formed, the structure of it. I think a glycan group would be a good name for a company that sells protein shakes. You know, you know. But anyways, guys, I'm gonna get back to the talk. I'm pretty much saying that really, what do we have as a human being? What are our advantages? What is given? What we find in the conscious waking state is mind being awareness as the whole moment, which really can't move, like a candle that illuminates the light of a room. Um, we can say we are light that is conscious of itself, because our visual existence is in light. So when we are subjectively considering the information in light, being the information in light, you know, there was a saying. They would say the mystic who had the pearl in the mountains didn't really have the pearl. It was the mystic in the busy market who could have hold the pearl. That was the one who had understood the value of the pearl. The pearl is the Sufi term for enlightenment, metaphor. My findings on the attention are this: attention in the outer realms. It's a the change of the world is based on form changing. Behind your eyes, the attention to form can change. Not the form. Behind your eyes, you're not a form. When I speak about the inner realms, that which is aware of the inner realms, the Upanishads say, the seer of the seen, the one who's seeing stuff that you can see is unseen. What does that mean? That means there's a design um, factor to human consciousness, that it appears as first person. And due to appearing as first person, it sees the world before itself. It is the world before it is itself. That's the ultimate wisdom. But most people, if they are the world, their individuality wouldn't make sense to them. So right now, the way civilization is that the best thing people can do is pretty much I was saying this, where it's like the Buddhic archetype noticed the individual hell and decided to get out of the individual hell. Once the person goes beyond their individual suffering and they find their individual heaven, that's the idea of like the self-enlightenment. You did it, you enlightened yourself, yay. Then there's this idea that after you found you were in hell and you were personally in hell and found the personal heaven, you're going to notice, even though you found heaven for the self, the world, you'll notice the world's hell after you notice here, let me tell you like this. Reality is divided in let's say it in the sense of self and world. So the basic way people are appearing is as a character in a story. Now the self is trying to live for itself. At the same time, it's living somewhere. And that somewhere makes it realize it's not just itself. So the bodhisattva would seek to see if there's a way beyond the collective suffering. That means the Buddha was identifying with the self. The Bodhisattva was identifying as the world, pretty much, I would say. We can say attention and identity are separate. We can only identify with what is in our attention. If something is not in your attention, you can't identify. Back in the day, there's a story of this Christian missionary who goes to this Cherokee community. And there's a person from this Cherokee community that has attempted to come and live in civilization. Now, this missionary priest goes to this Native American and says, "You have to believe in Jesus Christ, or you will go to hell." Something of these lines. The native man who hears this he's intimidated by it. These are intense words for him to hear. And then he says, what happens to children who can't read or speak or learn the religion yet? Do they go to hell? And then the Christian priest tells him, no, they don't know. Because they don't know, they don't go to hell. And then the native turns back to the priest and says, why did you tell me that? And you see, it is the imposition of the idea that we require strength as creatures to see something and be able to realize that the seer can keep walking. That is the greatest skill, really. You know, I could tell you that when I was introduced to the idea of religion, I lived in Iran, so it was a theocratical society. You, like, as much as you act like you're free there, the mind isn't free. So a nation that the citizens don't have free minds is a nation that has slowed down its own evolution, honestly. Because a lot of intellectuals, they leave the country that doesn't have freedom for a country for freedom. If you honestly wonder what the biggest source of immigration is, it is freedom. That means if all countries suddenly updated at the same pace, in the same way, in the same state, we would need no immigration. Because it's like of course, there's different landscapes, environments, and cultural fabrics and origins. But I'm saying overall, there is a basic freedom that the mind needs or it feels it doesn't exist. That freedom is why your free will is given to the creature, poetically and cosmically speaking. What does that mean? That means you have free will, not per se because you are the free will. Because the free will is required to actualize the inner realms. Because when I think about my inner realms, everything I prayed for when I was young, instantly, the moment I made the prayer, was instantly accessible. It was as if I could see what my prayer before I prayed for it. So it was as if it was instantly given. So you could say it's as if all our prayers, they're answered the moment they're made. But they are not manifest. And so if we consider the creature and the karma of the creature just being in accordance to an objective life, we may not realize that there is a significance to an unknown event that is only accessed when we go with the event. That means it's like sometimes in life you gotta trust that adventure, that wonder, that life is calling you, in some way. That means you gotta trust your inner realms or you can't build anything here. You have to trust your intelligence or you can't move. Literally, like when you drive a car, you gotta trust your ability, your capability, and then you just attempt the action. A lot of these things in life, especially personally, before I bring emotions, I have a design-based analysis of it. When I say design-based, that means I don't have an opinion because there is no self when I'm looking at a phenomenon. The self arises in accordance to the attentions. I don't know, on some level there can be an argument uh, of the genetics being in the driver's seat, and there can be an argument that the genetics are the vehicle. So both those arguments can have profound implications. One is suggesting we are a remote control car being used from another dimension. The other implication is something else. The idea is that these are archetypes. Like when you listen to Jordan Peterson speak about Carl Jung and speak about Jesus Christ, Carl Jung says Christ, the archetype he had around was the archetype of the Father. Like that was the symbol that he could use in that moment. And now we're in a world where there's completely different symbols. That means you can say that we are actually attention before the creature, for the creature is being observed in attention. That means I don't have the same body as 10 years ago. Can I say I'm the same person? That means physically I am not the same person. So even ideologically, different domains of different levels of experience of changed me as a person since 10 years ago. So I can totally see that it's like the self that we think is unchanging, the me that we celebrate its birthday every day, not every day, but every year. That imagine an eternal being. Either you don't celebrate your birthday or every day is your birthday. You know, you're like, yeah. You know, it's like when you drive a vehicle, you need to first know what's going on inside the vehicle, but you also need an awareness to the outside of the vehicle. And I feel when we think about like this idea that we're piloting through our minds, the mind is the plane of existence and we're piloting it, oscillating between feeling self is projecting world and world is projecting self. You know, it's like the question of whoever said you can find purpose in this life. I don't know who said that. I feel more that it's a emergence of your creative engagement with the world. And creative means that, here's the thing, if you think about honesty and dishonesty, if you had no concept of a future, you could not have morality. Did you know? If you had no idea of a past and future, who is bad, who is good, when were they bad, when were they good? How are we comparing their action to a past moral correct action? You see, when there's no past and future, the ideological, the linguistic simulation, I don't want to say completely vanishes, but attention's texture is different. So when I come to give these talks, for example, somebody asked me today, uh, how do you, when do you give these talks? Like, what's the schedule? And I was like, it's like asking an antenna when it gets a signal, you know? For me, it's like that's what waking up is. It's the signal that's received, and now this is what it is, appearing. The inner realms are phenomenal. The inner realms are the life that only you get to see, really. Like, I have no expectation for anyone outside of my eyes to see my eyes exactly the way I'm looking through it. I have no expectation because it's impossible. And it's not even necessary because we have different DNA. So when you realize we have different DNA, if you think about it individually, and we build a civilization where, for example, do you know how many girls in this world are being born and their idea of what beauty is behavior and appearance only? Do you know? So for me, so for what I mean by that is that instead of us realizing we're 8 billion unique individuals, part of one brain, cosmic brain, or a human vision of a brain, you know, like humanity's a vision. I'm just saying, like, here's the thing. If I wanted to compare myself, I would depress myself towards extinction. Because 100% this world, there's people who are greater and people who are not greater. And if you compare, it's false, temporary, you like devoured an emotion for a moment, but was it worth it? You know, for me, it's like the emotions are, believe it or not, I mean, they are, here's the thing. When the known entity lives for a while, it feels it's being defined by a known pattern that it is creating. Because it feels it's being defined by the known pattern it's creating, it wants something outside of itself to move itself so it knows it is more than itself. Do you know? That means I think this is the deep down, condensed reason of why the savior complex continues in psychology. So you think, I don't think procreation, like I don't think overpopulation is a problem if we build sky cities. So I wouldn't say it's too much of a big deal, overpopulation. The thing is, we just have to prepare for it, you know. You know, it's weird. It's like existence is experientially preparing itself for non-existence, because what else can it do? Nature shows its face, then it waves and it's gone. For me, when I think about any moment in my life that I consider divine, it's kind of, it's a strange, again, coin of sorrow and joy, where I feel like it has been so uncomfortable living as a human being that there is this subconscious urge to unidentify with what doesn't work and then re-identify with what works. And in that process, sorry guys, let me relocate. I'll be back. So where was I going with this? Pretty much imagine attention is the spotlight, and uh, there is various actors in the stage, on the stage. So it means that your mind is observing various states of the body, various ways the body is throughout the years, yet the mind is recording it as a single self, you know? And when we look at the concept, when I said attention and identity are separate, really that's a key point, because right now, human beings, they feel attention and identity are the same. That they feel just because what they're seeing is like only that. Do you know what I mean? But when you realize the attention is separate from the identity, the identity or the identification is just what has been engaged in attention. But there's multiple things accessible to the mind. The person can see various ways. Do you know? That means you imagine it's like you can identify with any color in the color spectrum. Imagine you can identify with any idea imaginable. You know, imagine like in the future, people identify with being gods, like Greek gods, you know. Like everyone named Athena goes on a strike and says we're actually Athena. Who knows? I think seeing the attention as not just a light in one room, but a light in multiple rooms, I think that's insightful. I think that's what's needed now. People don't need a truth as if it's a key to a door. People just need to accept the simplest element of their own being. And then life is always moving from the simple to the complex. You know? That means anything complex you see in your life, you're like, okay, it had to simply get there, you know, from simpler principles as the foundations of the movement. What's interesting is, like, you can say all schools of thought divide with either thinking the attention is the ultimate state of reality, or thinking what's in the attention is the ultimate. If we think what's in if we identify with the content, phenomenological content with our moment, you know there's no problem with the identifying. There's a problem with forgetting that you're just identifying with that phenomenon. That means it's like, how can I be? It's like when you look in the mirror, of course you see your face, but you also see, if the mirror was big enough, imagine there was at the edge of the universe like a mirror where, like, no way, the edge of the universe is a mirror. Like, how ridiculous, you know? So you would see that the whole universe is simultaneously reflected in the mirror as you are. Do you see? That means even though I have washed my face every morning, I have never seen that the face of the whole face in the mirror, the cosmos. The inseparability of the individual activity and the cosmic activity is very strange, because in the yogic practice, it's as if the individual is like a drop, and either they go from, like, the river into the ocean, and then, um, evaporate that way or integrate that way, or they in some sense instantly evaporate. So the concept of renunciation was like the person could suddenly see beyond the individual they were considering to be. You know what it is? Just like our body can move in space, in physical space, in the space-time continuum, your attention can move uh, in a subjective continuum, the inner realm. Your imagination is a room. I would say that's kind of like my contribution so far. That it's multiple rooms, guys. Stop freaking out for belief. Stop trying to find, one truth to something that is so unknown and vast and multidimensional. Like how can, you know? Even though a singular truth sometimes helps, depends on the torments of your life. You know, depends on if you feel you're not being yourself. I could say it's like, I wouldn't say that, like, that's the I wouldn't take it as far as saying that's like the person being possessed by something. Like, if you're not being yourself, what are you then being? I would say, the thing is, like, when the person is not being themselves, that means they haven't accepted something that they are. So you as a human being, unless you accept everything that you are, there could be a hole to the ship. You know what I mean? Because it's there's like too many unknown variables. The same way where one person says this is true and other people are like, yo man, there's more. That's not true. You know? So the same that same mentality is even with the one's own attention in the experience of each memory. That means it's kind of strange that I feel like even in these talks, just every event, every conscious event of my life, it's like a performance, you know? It's an elemental performance. It's a happening. It's something that's happening. You know, now I can consciously engage it and utilize the evolutionary opportunity of being a conscious creature, or be like, nah, man, I just want to go with the waves. It's like, who am I when God is being the world, really? if I take that ultimate approach of oneness, but I'm telling you, it's like we cannot forget we're human, and that's the scariest thought. You know what's even scarier than extinction? For not being human and then that being extinct. Like it can be savage. The future can be savage. We're just like telling the future, it's like, yo, mind yourself. It's remarkable, you know. I would say the center. We say gravity is pulling on this planet towards the center. I mean, let's just stay classical scientifically and not bring in space time yet. But let's just say it's like the mass of the bigger the mass, the greater gravitational pull, they say, right? So that means it's like the bigger the object, the bigger it's pulling itself, thanks to the center, you know? I would say if the psychology was seen like a planet, its center is an event. It's one event. This is why everybody feels when they remember who they are, it's like oneness. Because honestly, where can a dualistic creature go? You can either go towards oneness thinking the world is oneness, you can go towards emptiness thinking the world is empty, or you can go towards infinity, or you remain in duality. You know? It's like, what other exits do people see beyond dualism? And so I'm in a civilization, like right now it's an interesting part of the world because like many people don't realize this, but Terence McKenna, this man created a concept that was very essential for human thought. The concept of the archaic revival. That means history is repeating itself, but also reanimating itself. That means it's like we're here thinking it's just our genetics, but these are events. These are planetary events. It's like we're on the shoulder of the giant and we think we're moving. It's like, how adorable, you know. You know, if I was to say if I have piloted in my inner realms, I could say I've just gone into a moment where, just like a chess game, I've let the world move first before me. A weird, I don't know, just natural kind of, just, here's the thing, the same way we define a person with desire, before, like, I'm telling you, there's also states where the person can have no desire, regardless of their ideology. The person is just witnessing, just watching the moment, like a film. Like when you watch the film, you know you're not that character in the cinema, you know? You know you're not that character. But when you are watching yourself day to day, and even though your physical body is changing and your ideology is changing, only your name is unchanging. our names create our individuality. That means individual consciousness, if it was an equation, it would have to be unknown movement and singular effort. That means it's very fascinating. Like your free will in a group activity is very different than your free will when you're alone. Your free will on a bus is very different than your free will when you're off the bus. You know what I mean? Like when we enter different spaces in society, our behavior animates in accordance to how clearly we've observed the environment. You see, I was thinking this idea that I thought it was like a very essential idea to share, especially for anybody who's pursuing the arts. I once thought, what does it mean to be a great artist? What does it really mean? And then suddenly my attention went to history. And I'm like, how can I compare? How can I sit here and say Da Vinci was better than Picasso or Picasso was better than Da Vinci? You know? Like, I was just for a second realizing that the greatness of the artist has to do only with how much they have dared explore, they have dared attempt. Because here's the idea: if it's temporary beings, perfect idea. We have to explore. We get to get a good view of what's going on here before we transition out of this plane of existence. Before we pilot out of here, you know. And then there's this other view where you are an eternal being, and we're like, whoa, 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 you're an eternal being, and as an eternal being, why would you need to survive or be an individual or do anything? So that means if you're so, the ultimate truth is here, why are we here? Why are we here then? Do you know? That means like if you're religious, I'm asking you, are we God's imagination right now? Why? Do you see? If you're secular, I'll tell you, how could something come from absolute nothing? That means what pushed nothing into something? You know, what force or mystery? So we eventually reach a point where we can't even see. So the collective has limits too. And I think that's just the cooler challenge. People are now really living mainly in accordance to their inner realms because there isn't greater collective activities. You know what's strange? It's like when a kingdom was at siege back in the day, everybody would go wake everybody up. You know? Now it's as if the inner natural kingdom of the mind of man is under siege, but everybody is very comfortably just sleeping. Do you know? So what I'm telling you is like the issue, it's two sides. One is like 50% the individual has to get their shit straight. The other thing is the whole civilization and the governing powers have to get their shit straight. Like that's how it works. You know? You know, sometimes I feel life doesn't have like a story like purpose really. What at most wants to happen is like what I think really, how I feel when I give these talks is like I'm just a person on a battlefield out of 8 billion. And I'm like, holy shit, what is this? Like, it's like, who are we even fighting? Who's the fighter? You know, whose war of manifestation is this? Like, I can't tell you. Sometimes when I've really reached peak intense emotions, I've had to just pick up the pen and roar on the empty page. Literally, it's like shouting, but through writing. You know, it's like utter release of your anger, but your writing becomes intense. You know, so it's like the guy's getting rid of his anger or intensity or whatever emotion by just like writing it on the page. You know, I've had moments where I've like literally something karmically has happened, and I've been so offended that I literally picked up a piece of paper and wrote a letter to the universe. I'm like, what is this? This was when I was in Birmingham. You know, I was like at you know, it wasn't an abundant time, but internally it was a very abundant time, but externally it wasn't that abundant. You know, it's honestly the states of reality are like weather. You know, and the cool thing is that there's multiple. Like, I'm so happy I wasn't just born in in one emotion. Can you imagine? Can you imagine like some person, like every child, based on the emotion they first have, they become that emotion their whole life? Can you imagine? I mean, this isn't true, but I'm saying imagine, like, hypothetically, we of course experience multiple. Like, we're way more multidimensional than that. But I'm like, imagine you were just one emotion. So it's just incredible the fact that we can experience different emotions, you know. So it's like, here's the thing: they say water that goes that doesn't run anymore, that like in nature it goes like, what's the term? If you don't move, you die. Do you know? So similarly, if like you're okay, maybe that was a bit too dramatic. I'm just saying, like, every person, their DNA, we should perceive an advanced civilization would probably do this. You know, I hope it better. You know, that we stop seeing people through a defining system of per se comparison. Not that we get rid of competition, but that we stop seeing the person's value in relation to something. We let the person express their value. That means that would be a healthy civilization where the civilization would allow you, but then you would have to allow yourself. You know, that means, like, really what we want as human beings, everybody who's living in this civilization, is we want a civilization that covers our blind spots. You know, once I was thinking, like, if I ever give a TED talk, this was what I was going to speak about. Like, this idea of there's a curvature, that when we're young, we're super energetic and we are less philosophically oriented about life, less studying life, more living it. You know, more like running into it. You know, but then when we get older, imagine the old person, although, you know, the old person, they're gonna have way more blind spots. So it's weird that when you're young you have a lot of energy but you don't have wisdom. When you're old you have wisdom but you don't have energy, you know. So because we get the lesson at the end of the journey, we can't really bring about change. You know what I mean? So your thing says too many jealous, greedy people have interfered. We imagined the whole world on house arrest. Shall we take their emotions away as well? No, no, no. We should see. Here's the thing: most people uh, try to fight fire with fire, and it's inefficient. Do you know? So I would say what the I. Okay, let me see how I could say this. Emotions are like different plants. People. Here's okay. I was actually on the midway of explaining the perfect metaphor. I was saying your DNA is like an instrument. So what does that mean? Everybody is an instrument, and life is a symphony. And if you're intelligent, you get to under comprehend the instrument that you are, and you start playing your song. Because the inner realms, nobody else can see your eyes, really. That means when it comes to motivation, really nobody can motivate you. I mean, I've seen motivational videos online, but I'm like, okay, none of these people know who I am, you know? So, so I've been in this situation where I'm like, okay, so where can motivation comes? And the clue was that it was within. That something about your eyes seeing the world is going to be the greatest transformation of energy, you know? Sometimes you gotta, like, the vehicle doesn't have an intelligence on its own. We can't say atoms have, like, matter has a mind, really. We can just say that the matter is being driven by that mind in that moment in that way. That means that to identify a human being and to see the complexity of who is really there, it's pretty intense. Nullifying human beings, you see, it's like, most people know about the book 1984, which was written by George Orwell, in 1948. And few people know about a book that was written by Aldous Huxley, known as The Brave New World, where in that world, pleasure was an illusion. In the other world, suffering was an illusion. In Brave New World, it was as if like the illusion was joy. That means it was seen as a sort of, heaven was an escapism from the world you actually had to live in. Guys, because I brought Papaji up, I'm gonna honor Papaji's guru, Sri Ramana Maharshi. And Sri Ramana Maharshi, if I could tell you, some people, as Papaji would say, call them the incarnation of silence. He is the human being that, um, he had understood what really it meant. You don't chase the butterfly. You just sit still and silent by the flowers, and the butterfly lands on your forehead. You don't chase the trailer of what you think the unknown, maybe. That's what I mean when you wait for the world to move first, and then you study that movement, and you can move, to some degree. So Sri Ramana Maharshi, I'm going to share some of his quotes with you. This man is a very important figure, and I honestly feel if they taught this to kids in schools, a lot of college stress and university stress for students they wouldn't have it if they could notice this. If they just, and this man was very simple guy living on a mountain called Tirapon, I can't even pronounce it. Tirapon, I can't pronounce it. Oh my god. This holy mountain, okay, starting with the letter T. And Ramana Maharshi, he was illiterate. He was a simple man. He was a yogi. Yet everybody from the world somehow came, And this man, he passed away. This was even before I was born, 1879 to 1950. You know, that means like Anyways, I'm going to read some of his quotes. So guys, I'm going to do something interesting, even though I said quote tunnel. But I went to Shiro Monomarshi's website, and there's some part of it where it's called like the gems literally of his teachings. And so anyways, I'm going to share a story that's on this website. He says, I'm going to read it for you. He says, so it's about how to conquer destiny. A well-to-do lady told Ramana Maharshi, I am blessed with everything that a human being would like to have. Her voice choked. Controlling herself, she continued slowly. I have all that I want, a human being may want, but, I do not have peace of mind. Something prevents it, probably my destiny. There was a silence for a while. Then he spoke in his unusual sweet manner. This is Shiromana Maharshi speaking. All right, you have said what you wish to say. Well, what is destiny? There is no destiny. Surrender, and all will be well. Throw all responsibility on God and do not bear the burden yourself. What can destiny do to you then? Keep in mind, guys, this is someone saying this before 1950s. So the lady then says, so Shiro Maharshi tells her, throw all responsibility on God and do not bear the burden yourself. What can destiny do to you then? And then, so Shiro Maharshi is saying there's no destiny, just surrender your suffering to the ultimate, to this ultimate presence. You know, not even, he doesn't even give it a word or concept or anything, he just says, be quiet. So Shiro Maharshi says, surrender. The lady looks at Shiro Maharshi and says, surrender is impossible. Shiro Maharshi responds, yes, complete surrender is impossible. Partial surrender is certainly possible for all. In course of time, that will lead to complete surrender. Well, if surrender is impossible, what can be done? Question mark. There's no peace of mind. You are helpless to bring it about. It can be done only by surrender. Wow. He's saying the archetype can endlessly run in the hamster wheel, but unless it steps out of the hamster wheel, it cannot become the master of the simulation that's designed for it to be temporary. So the lady says partial surrender. Well, can it undo destiny? I mean, she's probably not saying it the way I'm saying. Shiro Maharshi says, oh yes, it can. The lady says, is not destiny due to past karma? Shiro Maharshi says, if one is surrendered to God, God will look to it. Remember, guys, God is not just a concept to certain cultures. It was like the ultimate experience of reality. It had that sort of glow for certain cultures. So Shiro Maharshi says, if one is surrendered to God, God will look to it. The lady says, that being God's dispensation, how does God undo it? And then Shiro Maharshi says, all are in Him only. That means it's like metaphysically, the implication of what's going on here is some ladies like, I'm suffering, I don't have peace of mind, I think it's because of my destiny. She Ramana Maharshi says you gotta surrender this attitude. Pretty much. And she says surrender is impossible, but Sri Ramana Maharshi's like, you can partially surrender, and then in time the surrender will come. She says, will this partial surrender undo destiny? And here's the thing. At the end, he says, how does God undo it? The lady says, all are in him only. That means we feel we are individuals in a, think of the idea of the fractal, like as if we are the thoughts of the cosmos. The cosmos had a thought, and civilizations began rising, fall, and falling everywhere. That means the surrender is into, I believe, the conclusion of an ultimate, the experiencer. So pretty much he's saying that the one who is suffering is ultimately in that uh, truth. So it's kind of like you're in the truth. How could you be eluded? How could there be illusion? The Lotus Sutra had a depiction of the story of Buddha, that Buddha, before he passed away, wasn't so smooth and gentle, that there was a hysteria that had appeared, and he had suddenly realized, like as if a great illusion, and he looked at all his disciples and he's like, I have made a mistake. We were all enlightened from the beginning. An implication that the intelligence is not from the self but from the world. So if the self realizes the inseparability of the self and the world, the sufferer doesn't exist. So one thing that Sri Ramana Maharshi is saying is that there is a mystery to how consciousness is arising, that it can all be, you can say materialism is a sort of belief, is a destiny. That means your destiny is your DNA. You can totally think that it's a materialism has its own destiny too. But you can also see that uh, who and for how long is this is continuing. Like right now, I'm honestly like looking at, like, I don't know, the side of my door, but at the same time, it's not a name, it's not an object or a subject. That's my, I could say that's my, that's something I could say boldly. That what we are is neither a story, and it's neither an image which stories are made by. So it's as if we are noticing a difference between the mover of the image and the image. Because what is hope? Hope is, hopefully you can see a new image. It's the hope. It's trying to make kinetic the potential of a vision. Ramana Maharshi, I'm going to just go into a quote tunnel. He says, no one succeeds without effort. Those who succeed owe their success to perseverance. Yeah, tell me about it. Guys, I'm going to show you a picture of Ramana Maharshi so people can have a sense of what I'm speaking about. This is like the picture of him on Wikipedia. I'm going to put it for you. that was the thing. It was as if he had the experiential comfort of a knowing beyond his. He had the comfort of an unconditional knowing behind his eyes. He was one of those guys, one of those gurus. This is Sri Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi says, without understanding yourself, what is the use of trying to understand the world? Ramana Maharshi says, mind is consciousness which is put on limitations. You are originally unlimited and perfect. Later you take on limitations and become the mind. Ramana Maharshi says, one must realize his self, the S is in caps, in order to open the store of unalloyed happiness. Ramana Maharshi says, that which comes and goes, rises and sets, is born and dies is the ego. That which always abides, never changes, and is devoid of qualities is the self. Ramana Maharshi says, the degree of freedom from unwanted thoughts and the degree of concentration on a single thought are the measures to gauge spiritual progress. Ramana Maharshi says, you need not aspire for or get any new state. Get rid of your present thoughts. That is all. And he's saying that to a world where everybody is actually considering themselves to be a thought, Sri Ramana Maharshi says, time is only an idea. There is only the reality. Whatever you think it is, it looks like that. If you call it time, it is time. If you call it existence, it is existence, and so on. After calling it time, you divide it into days and nights, months, years, hours, minutes, etc. Time is immaterial for the path of knowledge. Ramana Maharshi says, even the structure of the atom has been found by the mind. Therefore, the mind is subtler than the atom. That which is behind the mind, namely the individual soul, is subtler than the mind. So he's pretty much saying that the soul has a different level of existential Photoshop opacity or opaqueness. What it means is that the true presence is there. Sri Ramana Maharshi says, if there's anything besides the self, there is reason to fear? Question mark. He says, who sees the second? First, the ego arises and sees objects as external. If the ego does not rise, the self alone exists and there is no second. Again, he's suggesting here that language is what has made us unaware that the self is the presence of nature before it has a personality, before it can name itself and go to work. It's just being here as nature. It's like the mystic, entered society and was like, wait a minute, so am I God going to work right now? It's like, who's God working for? Ramana Maharshi says silence is also conversation. Of course. Ramana Maharshi says concentration of the mind is in a way common to both knowledge and yoga. Yoga aims at union of the individual with the universal, the reality. This reality cannot be new. It must exist even now, and it does exist. Yeah, the concept of novelty is really for an individual. When there's no time, then change is being experienced as one event. So you can't conceptualize or you can't separate really from the event. So think as if right now yourself is a way you're considering you're separate from the world, from the event that is being this world. You know? Ramana Maharshi says the best way to meditate is through meditation itself. Ramana Maharshi says, I am not the perishable body, but the eternal self. Ramana Maharshi says our own self-realization is the greatest service we can render the world. Ramana Maharshi says the body dies, but the spirit that transcends it cannot be touched by death. Ramana Maharshi says, let come what comes, let go what goes, see what remains. Guys, this quote, I'm going to post it. This is an algorithm. This is a way to engage the mind. Whoever you are, wherever in the world. If you want to know if the person doesn't has abandoned an ideological purpose, or if I'm just telling you, this quote is a gem. Whoever notices it can pick it up, you know. Ramana Maharshi says actions yield result by the ordinance of God as He wills. Do you see, guys? That's the thing. Because how can you talk about something more than the self without it? Do you see, the moment something is beyond the edge of the self, it comes across to the human mind as absolute. That means sometimes I wonder, what what has ever been considered perfection? Anything, let's say, done perfectly, you're going to see the future generations are going to be way more perfect. You know, Salvador Dali says, don't fear perfection, you'll never reach it. That means try everything. That means, but it doesn't mean, I don't mean try everything. I mean, like, give yourself freedom to live before you actually move. That's so essential. That's the inner space where creativity has somewhere to go, you know? Sri Ramana Maharshi says, for those who have obtained unobstructed knowledge of self, the world is seen merely as a bondage-causing imagination. I mean, sure, because there's so many cause and effect probabilistic things. Like, think of how many different creatures on this planet are moving, different events are taking place. So on some level, we can never actually have an accurate vision of it, you know? So what does that mean? That means it's a stimulus. A lot of imagination can be said to be from the stimulus, you know? But I'm telling you, imagination, the true imagination, really what people seek is the depths in beyond. They your own eyes, when they become more exciting to you than anything in the world, you will understand why it makes sense that if every day happens once, efficiency should be the outcome. That means efficiency means an allowance for the better. That means any moment the person chooses to look down on themselves, same time you could be looking up. So you choose at the end. You know, you choose. The thing about emotions is that because you have free will, you can navigate. Even though I'll personally say, like, anger or certain other emotions, they can linger for a while. So the person can take more than like 10 minutes or anything or something like that to just sit still and let the emotion pass, like a cloud that's just blocking their sun for a moment, you know. Ramana Maharshi says self-reform automatically brings about social reform. Ramana Maharshi says when there are thoughts, it is distraction. When there are no thoughts, it is meditation. Yeah, silence is the gate to ultimate being. Ramana Maharshi says, who am I? Not the body, because it is decaying. Not the mind, because the brain will decay with the body. Not the personality, nor the emotions, for these all will vanish with death. That is the most... Yeah, they definitely should teach him in universities too, you know. You know, many religions, many traditions, they speak about compassion. They speak about caring and loving each other. Yet, if you really love the world, you would see it. You would attempt to try to see it regardless of the ideological landscape. You know, it's like for me, it's strange. It's like what I consider human life to be is like advanced technology just left on the ground of this earth. The advanced technology, as if it like it infused with the earth, and now we're that advanced technology. You know, it's as if there's a nostalgia of being the stranger to the world, and then there is the familiarity that you have always been on home here in Gaia. You see, the Gaian mind, just the notion that the planet has a mind, or how in mythological context back in the day, they saw, for example, civilization on the back of a giant turtle. What does that mean? That means the world was alive to them. That wasn't necessarily even too much other for having the idea of spiritual or not. It was just the experience that the world is more for the lens of the mind. That's, you know, I feel really what it is what we created language. We were so chill as human beings. We the same way we, for example, we sparked fire on, discovered fire. We were like, wait a minute, you telling me I could name an object and use that as a sort of reference point against a feedback loop with the object to endlessly have a sort of simulation of individual mind? And when we realized that language was really the eyes of the mind opening, what are the purpose of eyes? March into the unknown. For what else can the unknown do? That's the beauty of life, that it has unknown variables. I'm happy that it does, you know? Because a knowledge that feels like a picture on a wall, it's like uh, you will leave that building in an instant. So for me, it really, it's as if I give idea. For a second, I thought if you treated an idea like a person, like right now, we're fighting for human rights. You know, we're like, we gotta treat ourselves like humans. You know, and then imagine in the future, someone comes and fights for the right of an idea, as if ideologies can have lawyers in the future. You know, the idea on its own merit. You know, that means thinking as if the idea had a personality, was animate. So when I think about it in regards to ideas, for me, it's like anytime I feel that Here's the thing, everything always is being accessed on a design level before any story or context is given. So we have like experientially, the concept is what we're conscious of existence, and then the context is like the unknown. So what does that mean? That means if our knowledge was inside the sphere, outside of the sphere is unknown. And so that's the effort. I think that's the best way we can use the conscious waking state, to realize that when you're awake, you must let the world, you must see the world before you see anything else, or you won't see the world. You know what I mean? And it's strange because, like, even if we take the theatrical approach of how even Shakespeare saw life as a play, and in Vedic thought, there's the idea of Leela, the play of forces, the play of the will of the ultimate. Now it's kind of like, are we writing the script to our own play? That's the inner realms, and the outer realms is a script where every person from the world that their eyes have known has to care a little bit and come and try to see. It's like, okay, how can we build this science project that's left here after 4 billion years? That's civilization. We gotta. It's like, who else is gonna build it? I say, like, what the birds and animals and nature are gonna be like. We love you, human beings. We're gonna build your civilization for you. You know. It's like, no. The cool thing about being a human and being here is that you have access to the creative expression of being. That means I was like, wait a minute, before I draw something, is the whole moment like cosmic artwork being drawn? Like, what is this? And it's being drawn by the forces of nature. I'm like, am I nature's sculpture right now? I was like really contemplating that. And I'm like, you know, then you realize, no, the linguistic simulation is something to be very playful in. It's a labyrinth. I don't want to say labyrinth, but it's a simulation that you get out of through playfulness. That is the only exit I know out of the ego's weight. Because it's like a surfer on a surfboard. You gotta adjust to the wave. You can't just be like, okay, only stand one way in the wave on the surfboard. That's the meaning of life. That's the meaning of surfing. No, you gotta adjust to the wave. Be aware. Look at the environment. Even look at your own fall before you fall. To try to micro conceptualize your fall before you fall, so you don't fall on something dangerous, for example, or something. But when you ride the waves of the universe consciously, then you can't complain about how you are standing on the surfboard. You know what I mean? Like, really, like, everybody, there's this saying that says everybody is fighting a battle you can't see. Like, everybody has some sort of suffering or problem they're dealing with. But the thing is, um, that problem is only real to that self. It's as if problems have owners. Problems are like children. They're birthed. They are put there. You know, because the child it doesn't matter at what place. It doesn't matter if it's that's the beautiful thing about children entering this world, because it's like, it doesn't matter if the where the child is. The child's nature is engaging it before conceptually engaging it. That means the observation of the child's psychology throughout life of behavior is giving it an alphabet to express itself, and because that's the alphabet it can express itself, its ideological conception is going to be limited to its expression. So that's the issue with desire. It's like you get something, but you don't get the full picture. You know. That means there's a joy in biting the apple, the forbidden apple, but at the same time, it's as if you could realize uh, something superior than the concept of that, even. Do you know? Then the inferior doesn't bother you. You fear what you don't know, but strangely, if you went to know it, the fear wouldn't exist. How could it? Oscar Wilde says, "Give a man a mask and he will." Okay, let me find the quote. Oscar Wilde says, "Man is least himself when he talks in his own person. Give him a mask and he will tell you the truth." Yeah, that's why so warriors wore armor. Armor was a mask for the whole body. Can you imagine some warrior? I think armor was the lazy warrior's fighting strategy. You know, the warrior who was like, okay, it's like this way, like I can't be touched. I could say knights were the earliest archetypes for the Pacific Rim robots we see, in movies. I think the inspiration ultimately comes from that meme. So let's consider this idea. He says, "Give him a mask and he will tell you the truth." Give a man a mask and he will tell you the truth. That means if the person feels they can't become less with speaking, they will speak honestly. If they feel they can become less, if they fear the outcome of their own honesty's expression, then they have no reason to be honest. So the fear has won. If fear was a general fighting you, that general has conquered you. And the same way they said, like Sun Tzu would say, like if you the way you defeat the general that's fighting you is that you disconnect. What do you call it? Pretty much, Sun Tzu was saying something about like the general was like the leader, and then the soldiers were there. So if the soldiers didn't engage the leader, then the soldier would have become the fools of their own destiny. Because then that other team had the advantage of leadership. Do you know? So it's kind of like we're trying to do the same thing with fear if fear was a general. And so we want to separate fear from its content, from its image. And that's what I'm telling you. This is the best way I've found that in any emotional state, if you just take your attention to the design of phenomena, you free yourself from the implication of the narrative. You don't necessarily free yourself, but you notice there can be more. Because living feels like climbing. That's how time feels. Time feels like a mountain, and we're all climbing it, and we're all looking at it from how far we've been in the system. Ramana Maharshi's main technique was self inquiry.
What can be said? The attention is where the mystery is noticed. It's like a person, just very casually walking, on the sidewalk and suddenly being like, wait a minute, is God in my attention right now? It's like is this whole world being simultaneously a phenomena of attention, which leads to the experiencer, and the phenomena of existence. That means the fact that we say my body hurts or my body is healthy, or like you see, we say my mind. We say, people say my soul is burdened or tormented or something, or they say my soul is liberated, free, and beyond words, so you see, what it is we are taking ownership. We are treating the mind like a body. We want this. I think it's the assumption that we're seeking a salvation similar, like it's like the mind is not like is the mind is space's life. The body is matter's life, you know anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. Much blessings and namaste. And as a quote I remember Sri Ramana Maharshi say, he said, meditation is your true nature. Get to know the value of your own eyes. It will astonish you. That means it's like we exist here to be us, you know? And I've had various moments where I could say I've noticed the presence of my mind. And do you know what I have done in that moment? I have simply bowed to the moment, to the whole moment, in a very simple Japanese style bow, to the moment, as if it deserves it. It's here, you know. That's natural honor. That's the honor we need, that we're going to defend nature from technology if it gets too messed up in the future. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Blessings.